weeks ago in our lectionary, and so.
Oh, you mean in the daily lectionary?
No, in the Protestant lectionary.
There's a Protestant lectionary? I thought they used the same lectionary.
No.
No, I know the feast.
After all these years.
Now, I know that the Orthodox have a different lectionary, and the Feast of the Transfiguration is huge. By the way, I have a couple images of it. You want to put it up? I have a couple images of the Transfiguration icon.
Visual
Sure,
aids.
why not?
Visual aids, I got one. I got a good of Lent, and then I didn't know there was a Protestant lectionary. The Anglicans?
It's called the Revised Common Lectionary.
That would be probably them. Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's used by.
Methodists would probably use it.
I don't know about Methodists, but
Lutheran?
Episcopalian, Anglican, Lutheran,
Yeah, good, yeah.
all those guys.
Is that
We
your
want to
real?
put it.
Is that your real one? That's the real one.
It's not, no. This is a print. Even though it feels like you'll be there, regardless of what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of Jesus, we've got a really interesting story today. The Transfiguration, we call it. But it's Jesus takes his disciples up the mountain, Peter, James, and John up the mountain, and they have a pretty wild experience. So, my first question is, why is this story of the mountaintop transfiguration, why is this a Lenten reading? Why is this one of the readings?
Yeah, because as we were talking earlier in other lectionaries, it's not. It's this is what it is. And while we do have the feast day in our lectionary, it's not a major feast day. This is the time to really talk about it. I think it's because it's in Lent on the second Sunday because it's meant to be an encouragement. If we're talking about last week going into the wilderness, we're talking about Jesus going to Jerusalem and dying there. What this story is supposed to do, and by the way, I guess I should back up a little bit and say this is a defining moment in Jesus' life. In the past, he's the itinerant preacher, he's the healer, he's multiplying the loaves and fishes. Now all of that stops, and he goes to Jerusalem. And he knows what awaits him there, that it's not going to go well. I think the whole point of this is not to encourage Jesus, but to encourage his disciples, so that whatever you're going to experience there, it's not going to be good, but be encouraged because of this experience of the Transfiguration.
Okay, so let's break down what actually happens on the mountaintop, and why is that supposed to be an encouragement to Peter, James, and John?
Right. Go ahead. Finish what you're saying.
So Jesus suddenly, his face shone like the sun, and his clothes become white as light.
Yeah.
So he changes his appearance completely.
Yeah. Now, I think the disciples had some kind of an experience. Now, some spiritual writers would say that this story is really revealing something that happened to them internally as opposed to something that happened to Jesus externally. But all the while, this is supposed to be an experience that touches them to realize that Jesus is the Son of God and that the road he's taking you on, you can trust it. That this is the I say this in my homily this week, that I think everybody has such experiences as this.
Okay, well, this experience is a little crazy to me because suddenly we've got Moses and Elijah randomly showing up.
Yeah.
And something else. How did they know it was Moses and Elijah?
I don't know the answer
Because
to that.
Moses and Elijah have both been dead for hundreds, if not thousands of years. In Moses' case, I think. How did they recognize them?
See, that's why I don't know if it was necessarily an external, but an interior one, in the sense of when it's an interior, and by the way, theologians call this either a peak experience or a moment of grace. When these things happen to you, and I know they've happened to you, and they've happened to me, you know details.
I've never met Moses and Elijah.
Maybe not the specific
I've never
part.
been on a mountain with Jesus, but
Right. But you've had peak
I don't
experiences.
I don't know why you're talking.
You've had peak experiences. You've had encounters with God that were definitive, that you knew inside of you that something happened that changed you.
Okay.
Sorry. Something like this.
But what is it about? What's the significance of Moses and Elijah to Peter, James, and John?
Well,
I mean, obviously they've like heard of them, and they were like legends of Israel. And,
right. Two very, of course, Peter, James, and John, observant Jews. So, what are the most important things to the observant Jew at that time with the law and the prophets? Moses represents the law, Elijah the prophet. However, both of those persons, Moses and Elijah, had theophanies or experiences like this on mountains, on the same mountain, Mount Sinai. So I think it's both of those things. The fact that here are two people that had these mountain experiences like this, but also too they represent the law and the prophets. And I think they would have intuited that. I don't think they had name tags. I'm Moses and I'm Elijah.
Okay.
But
so this would be sort of like you meeting the Pope.
Well, I would have known if I met the Pope. I think I'd know it.
Huh?
I think I would know if I met him because I recognize his face.
Yeah, but it'd be like that big, like for Peter and James and John to meet.
Oh, I got you. Yeah. No, the Pope. Wow, that's interesting. What would it be like meeting
somebody that's a big deal that you like?
Yeah.
Okay,
It could be like meeting the Pope.
Okay. Anyway, so this experience is supposed to be an encouragement to the disciples. By the way, it says Moses and Elijah were talking with Jesus, conversing with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
What do they have to talk about?
I don't know. I don't know that one either. I don't know what they were talking about. The law and the prophets, talking about where Jesus is all about.
Little Bible trivia.
No, hey, Jesus, man, you're on the way, man. This is going to be the next trip this is the next step in your journey, and probably encouraging him maybe a little bit.
Oh, okay. And then the bright cloud, takes over the mountain, and the voice speaks.
The whole idea of theophany, voices speaking clouds. This is all the details that biblically would signal here's God present, acting in all of this.
Okay.
And Moses was up on the mountain. God spoke. There was a cloud. Mm-hmm. So this is sort of the way it works.
So,
and by the way, the first reading, Abram, who eventually becomes Abraham, is having a similar experience. God is speaking to him about a similar risk, about going to a land he has never been to before. Jesus is on his way to Jerusalem. Abram's on the way to this new land he's never been to before.
Okay. So it's this incredible, encouraging experience for the disciples.
Right.
But Jesus tells them, after it's all over, Jesus tells them not to tell anybody.
Until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead.
Yeah, so
yes.
Why, and why is it only the three of them and not the rest of the disciples that get to have this?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's an important
get to have
question.
This encouraging experience that's gonna give them the faith to stick with Jesus.
That's a good question,
Sure.
and why didn't it happen to all his followers? But Peter, James, and John are the same three that are going to witness Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. They're going to be there whenever Jesus is being tempted by the devil there. So that could be part of what they need to be encouraged about. They're going to witness that. And the reason why I would say that he told them not to tell anybody would be because maybe they wouldn't understand it, or maybe they won't understand it until after Jesus is raised from the dead.
Huh.
Because Peter does allude to it in his second letter.
Yeah, he says that experience gave them even more confidence to believe the message of the prophets.
Right. And so I think all of us need experiences like this to give us the confidence to go on in our lives. If I may, just for 1 second, I was going to put this in my homily, but I didn't.
Ooh,
I remember.
Only preview.
I remember whenever we did
Spoiler.
the second Alpha. I didn't do this. The second Alpha, we're all worried about, everybody's worried about being a prayer minister in all this. And the prayer ministry, during the retreat, we had prayer ministry. And I just remember sitting in a chair and watching all these folks pray for one another, be with one another, being together and experiencing this new life in Christ together. And it was a whole bunch of people in that second one. It was 150 guests we had. And I just remember that as being a real encouragement to me that there's incredible hope in the future of the church. If we as the church, and laity especially, can begin to act this way amongst each other and pray for one another and encourage one another in this kind of way, that was a great hope for me. That was 5 years ago. I never forget the moment whenever that happened.
So these encouraging experiences you're talking about, are these experiences that kind of come out of nowhere, or can we plan them and expect to have encounters with God?
That's a good question too. I don't think we can plan them. We can't do anything to make them happen, but we can dispose ourselves to them. I think by praying every day, by really living the gospel as our discipleship as profoundly as we possibly can, by prayer and fasting and almsgiving, I think we dispose ourselves to such experiences. I think a lot of people have these experiences, and because they're so unaware of God's working in their lives, they dismiss them as just some kind of a strange experience. And then maybe later on, they begin to realize actually what happened if they really begin to follow Jesus.
How does this idea relate to attending Mass every week? I mean, is that not an encounter with God?
It absolutely is. I think, in my homily, I do tell a story of someone who had a remarkable encounter with God at Mass. These kind of experiences...
Like one time, though? I mean, isn't that...
Well, I think what happens with these experiences, these peak experiences, is the veil between heaven and earth somehow comes down, and you all of a sudden see what's going on behind the scenes. Now, the Transfiguration, Jesus is the Son of God all the time, but nobody sees it because of his humanity being the thing that people see. All of a sudden, the Peter, James, and John see what's behind the scenes. I think everyone, and by the way, there's a little video which I'll mention in my homily too, called "The Veil Removed." It's kind of a strange little video. We'll put it on our website, where this daily Mass crowd are all of a sudden having this theophany of what's going on behind the scenes, behind the bread, behind the wine, behind the priest. They're seeing behind the scenes what's really happening. That's what this transfiguration or theophany is, or this moment of grace. All of a sudden, the veil is pulled back, and you see what's going on behind the scenes.
Right, but this was before the resurrection, so that's why this was. It was so rare or special for them to see Jesus as the Son of God and to hear God's voice that way. But we live on the other side of the resurrection, so shouldn't that be something we experience all the time?
Well, if we did, we wouldn't need any faith. If I knew what was going on in the Eucharist, in other words, we walk by faith and not by sight. If I saw by sight what's really going on at Mass, I would not require me to risk anything or have any faith in the real presence of Jesus. And so while we're post-resurrection, we're also pre-second coming. So while Jesus is here, he's not yet fully here. And so we still see things in a veiled way. Now, every once in a while, like this, I think we can see things in an unveiled way. And I do believe it happens to pretty much everybody. But this is still a rare occurrence. You can have it a couple of times in your life, but you'll remember them forever. You never forget them.
So, what should people be looking forward, listening for at Mass this weekend?
Oh, I guess you said that, and I want to. What is it that encourages you? And maybe that's one thing I want to say, which I need to add to my homily. I just thought of it. What is it? What do you do?
There's a lot of last minute changes to your home.
I know.
I
I started thinking about this. Does your small group encourage you? Does coming to Mass really encourage you? Do you have friends who encourage you on your journey? What is encouraging you on your spiritual journey day in and day out? And we don't have these theophanies every day. What's really encouraging you? I think that's the question we should ask
That's a
ourselves.
good question. All right. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you.